Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
Attain for Truth Show is sponsored by the Office of Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, a periodontal, dental implant and laser specialist in New York City, for over 40 years. Dr. Fialkoff was honored by the International College of Dentists and Pierre Fauchard, and received the Presidential Lifetime Humanitarian Honor from the White House. Call us at 718-229-3838.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to Attain for Truth Show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff. It's a pleasure to be back with you again tonight. Many of you have been asking how do I avail myself of all the previous episodes. Very simple. Go on YouTube. Find Attain for Truth Show, Attain for Truth Show. Click on the subscribe button and we'll be more than happy to have you as one of our members. And tonight we're going to continue with part 2 of the implications of the emotional tone scale and how to use this scale to improve your life, your relationships, how to minimize your stress. And the last show we ended off on something we're going to go back to, and we were talking about listening, and we were talking about, acknowledging. And engineer, if you can put that up on the screen, great. So, we really want to kind of recap this from the last show. In order to have an effective communication with someone else, really listen to them. Really listen to them. I've been guilty of that myself. Don't cut them off. Don't tell them you already heard it or they told you 1,000 times. Listen to them. And then once you listen to them and really understood, then acknowledge them in a way that they feel comfortable. Don't just acknowledge them so they don't speak to you any further because you're so overrun with them speaking to you or you don't want to say another word. Acknowledge them in such a way that you would be comfortable being acknowledged yourself when you're really trying to get a point across to someone. Think of what you wanted to have someone else do for you and do that for them. I think you'll be very happy with your acknowledgement. Once we have that, now you say, well, okay, that's going to solve everything for me. It's going to solve a lot. You'd be surprised how much listening for real and acknowledging for real will solve for you. But now let's implement emotions. Because life is full of emotions, and there's something called an emotional tone scale that was developed by L. Ron Hubbard. Mr. Hubbard was an engineer, was researching life, was always looking to see how he can improve his fellow man, how to make his life easier, how to decrease his stress. And he said that your ability to talk to any given man has to do with your emotional response to any given man. In other words, what you feel about them. Obviously, if you're angry at someone, you're really not going to want to talk to them. But if you're very enthusiastic about speaking to them, or you think that, wow, that's a really conservative attorney, I think I like that attorney, he's interested in me, you're up at the top of the scale, as you see there on your screen. Enthusiasm at the top, then cheerfulness, strong interest, conservatism, boredom, antagonism, anger, covert hostility, which is very dangerous, fear, grief, apathy, and death. And the scale goes either way. And during a day, it goes both ways. Sometimes it moves very quickly one way or the other. But sometimes you see some people that are chronically that tone. Some people who are chronically afraid. Some who are chronically angry. No matter what you say, they give you an angry response. Others are unbelievably enthusiastic and are probably great athletes, or unbelievable dancers, or great composers and sing melodies unbelievably well. And you say, wow, they have such an emotion to them. And they do. They're very high on that scale. And that scale actually is implemented with a triangle that's called the affinity reality communication triangle that leads to understanding. And so you see that communication was one of the parts, the listening, the acknowledging with another human being, the effective communication, going both ways, the speaking and listening and acknowledging each other. And with a reality, with an agreement, reaching an agreement, a reality. With affinity. If you hate someone, it's a little difficult to speak to them. That affinity, that is called hate. But the affinity of enthusiasm or cheerfulness, now you like that person. You want to be around that person. That's a positive affinity. And as you get more affinity and more reality and more agreement, more communication, this triangle can get very big. And that's when you fall in love with someone, right? Or you love an idea, or you love a concept, or you can have a lot of failures and upsets and conflicts, and the affinity goes down. Total disagreement, there's no reality. Communication is destroying, or maybe no communication. That triangle gets very small. What do we mean by affinity? Affinity, we mean emotional response, the feeling of affection or lack of it, of emotion or misemotion connected with life. Do you like the person, or you dislike the person? Do you want to be around someone, or you'd rather not see them again? That's affinity. And affinity is can be a misemotion. It doesn't just mean a positive emotion. So a misemotion is anything that is an unpleasant emotion, such as antagonism, anger, fear, grief, apathy, deathful feeling. And that's also affinity, but those are negative emotions. And those are not pleasant emotions. But here you have the spectrum of affinity in pictures. On the right, very high with an enthusiasm, exhilaration, happiness. On the left, an apathy, even though he's a young man. Maybe he's just lost something or lost someone in his life. Below him, a very angry or antagonistic person, upset with something that's compelling them. Their attention is fixed. They're not happy. You better not speak to them. God knows what will happen. And then on the right, see a bored spouse, the other spouse not paying attention at all, oblivious of his wife, and the wife in boredom. What do we mean by reality? Well, by reality, we mean agreement. We mean the things that we have in life, the things we can see. We know that a house is real, a television is real, a car is real. We see people are real. The solid objects, the real things of life. And when we see them, we agree that they're real, that they're called an agreement. And when we reach an agreement, things become more real. If you've noticed that, when you first met your spouse or you first met your girlfriend or boyfriend, it probably wasn't so real. But as you got to know each other more and you developed more of a liking, more communication, everything seemed to get more real. It's almost like you could predict what they were going to say because there was so much agreement, and you made that relationship. People say, well, we have a solid relationship, or that guy is a solid guy. Very interesting how we use these words many times, not realizing how right we are. And here you see the reality on the screen with the glasses being reality, the paper being reality, and they're reaching an agreement. The agreement being the reality that leads to really whether life goes forward with that agreement, whether we end the war, or whether there's a conflict and a disagreement, which continues the conflict, which continues the bombing, continues the killing. And what do we mean by communication? That's the last part of the triangle of this affinity reality communication triangle, the ARC triangle. By communication, we mean an interchange of ideas between two people, two terminals. Hubbard calls them terminals scientifically, because you've seen in the previous episode, part 1, that there's tremendous science that came from the Surgeon General, from the NIH, the CDC, on how negative communication causes not only emotional upsets, but physical disease in terms of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, dementia, early death. And so we know now that what we're covering today in this second part is something that's very important for us to know to handle these scientific problems so we can be healthier, so we can have more energy. So we want to exchange this communication between us. Here's an example of a man communicating to another man. That's communication, imparting his ideas, his beliefs, his thoughts. And these three things compose this triangle, the ARC triangle. And without affinity in this triangle, it's very hard to have reality or communication. And without a reality and agreement, it's very difficult to like someone or communicate to them. And if you're not going to communicate to someone, like if you have an upset with your wife, upset with your husband or a friend, you're not really going to have any affinity because there's no communication. Maybe you're in different rooms. Maybe you cut them off, you block them on Facebook. There's no communication. There's obviously not going to be any agreement or reality. And they're going to disappear from your mind. And they're not going to be someone that you're going to have much thoughts of in kindness or liking. You're probably going to have disdainful thoughts, unpleasant thoughts, and not bother anymore with them. And what does Hubbard say? He says a problem becomes a problem when we cease to communicate with each other, when the communication breaks down somewhere. We're not communicating. And he said, for a great many years, I asked this question, to communicate or not to communicate. If one got himself in such a thorough trouble by communicating, then of course one should stop communicating, right? But he says, but this is not the case. He said, no. That if one gets himself in trouble by communicating, he should further communicate. Hubbard says that more communication, not less, is the answer. So in other words, tonight, as you want to implement this, if you're in an argument with your wife, go communicate. If you had an upset at work, tomorrow, go communicate. Don't retreat. Don't throw the person away. Don't ignore the person. That's not going to lead to a resolution. That's only going to continue the problem. So, and what you want to do when you communicate, don't start criticizing and invalidating. In other words, Hubbard says, don't pay too much attention to what is wrong with him. You find out what is right with him and you improve that ability. So find out in this argument that you have with the other person, what part of it you feel that was good about it. Maybe he was right in some aspect of it. And when you start talking to him tonight or her tonight or tomorrow, whoever it is, find what was right about what they were saying and try to speak about that so you start getting some agreement. So you start liking each other a little bit more. We don't kill each other in this communication. The communication doesn't turn into an explosion, an argument, because it's a resolution of the problem. So how do we do this? Well, we do this by controlling our emotions. And what is an emotion? And this is from Webster's Dictionary. Emotion comes from e, away, movere, to move away, to flow out. So it's not to move away from someone, although it could be if you're angry at them, but it's to emote, to flow out. It's what comes out of us. Emotions come out of us. We can be cheerful, we can be angry, we can be sad, we can be apathetic, we can be enthusiastic. They come out of us and they flow out. And what we flow out determines the effects of our communications. So let's see how to use this tone scale to improve communication. So here you see the scale from enthusiasm down to death and apathy. And it goes either way. And what happens is as you go up in the scale, you get more survival. People want to be more alive. If you go down in the scale, you get more destruction, more death, more succumbing, not wanting to survive, not wanting to be there, to disappear, go away, right? And as we go up in the scale, we see that we're more intent on what we're doing. We're really determined. Our determination is in. We have a self-determination, and our attention goes out on the goal that we have, and we do it quickly. We don't sit there and think about it because we have a tremendous goal. It's like a game, like a football game or like a piece of art that you want to make, or an idea that you get, or, wow, that's what I want to do for a living. I'm going to do that. I'm going to be an attorney, or I'm going to be a professor. I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to be a musician. I'm going to be an actor. And you get this dream and you go to it quickly and you want it to survive and you're very high on this emotional tone scale. But if you had a lot of failures, a lot of upsets, and you've lost things, then maybe you have many problems and you're asking people for advice. You don't trust yourself anymore because you've done so many things wrong. You're under a tremendous amount of stress. You do things slowly because you're cautious. And the slower you go, the more problems you start accumulating and the more you're heading down the scale. So let's take a look at, well, what do we do? How do we implement this? I told you we want to communicate. So when you go to communicate tonight or tomorrow, how do you communicate? Well, this is very important. First, you have to recognize the emotion of that person, and then you have to do something, is you have to move a little higher than them so that the communication, they're going to listen to you and respect you. So to communicate to a person, be 1/2 to 1 emotional tone above them and slowly bring them up the tone scale. In other words, let's say you were talking to an angry man. You want to be antagonistic or bored. Now, you don't want to be antagonistic or bored at them. You want to be antagonistic or bored about whatever you have an agreement on. So let's say this angry man says, I am so upset with what mechanic did with my car. If you started being cheerful with this guy, he'd probably kill you. Or if you went into apathy, he'd probably think, who is this person? I don't need you. They would be too far away from his reality. But if you spoke to this angry man who was upset about his car and what happened to the mechanic, and you said to them, in an antagonistic tone of voice, you go, I had a problem with my car one time with a mechanic too. Is that what happened to you? And he goes, yeah. And he'd probably look at you because now you're his buddy. You're there with him. You're not antagonistic at him. You're antagonistic at the problem you and he have in common, reality. He's upset about cars, so you're going to, in an antagonistic way, tell him, you know what? I can understand. Unbelievable what I went through with that mechanic. And I had to spend so much money. The car still didn't work. You can make up if you want. The point is to help the person. You're not trying to hurt the person. You're trying to help them. You're not trying to sell them something. You're trying to improve their life. So use the tone above them. Now, you could also use boredom. So if you probably notice, if you get a really angry person, maybe you've gone home to your wife one time or your husband, they were really angry, not at you, but because of the day. But if you weren't lucky, they get angry at you. So what do? You come in bored, and you go, wow, what a horrible day. How was it? And they go, oh, I was telling you, horrific. Oh, yeah, my God. I don't even know what to tell you. I can see that. Look at how upset you are. Yeah, I am upset. Now you notice they went up a little bit. They're in antagonism now. You're doing what it says up here. You're bringing them slowly up the tone scale. You go, yeah, I see that. Wow. Yeah, well, if your son had come home on time, I wouldn't be upset. If your daughter had helped me in the kitchen, I wouldn't be so upset. Now she's antagonism. But it doesn't have to be a wife. It could be the husband. If you didn't give me so many things to do, I wouldn't have dropped the paint on the floor. Wow, yeah, honey, I understand what you mean. Well, you really do? Yeah, I'm so, I didn't realize it. You're probably right. See, I wasn't thinking, sometimes that happens, I guess. I can understand why you were so upset. Yeah, well, you know what? I guess now that you understand, I'm really not as upset anymore. What do you want to do? How are we going to fix this? Now you see he's come up to boredom, or she came up to boredom. That's how you use this. You're going to have to play with it a little bit. Don't think you're going to get it perfect the first time. But don't get nervous. Just play with it. Now here, let's start with the emotions. By the way, a lot of you are probably wondering, well, what do I do? What if I want to learn more? There's no problem. You can find this course online for free. It's called the Emotional Tone Scale. And if you want to, look it up. It's in volunteer, Scientology volunteer ministers. And it's a free course called the Tone Scale. Or you can just watch this again. Or you can email Atimefortruthshow@gmail.com. Atimefortruthshow@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. But let's take these people. Apathy. You probably encountered this like I did with my grandparents. And, you know, they kind of looked fixedly, but they weren't looking at you. And you probably went up to them, and to establish a point of reality, you put your hand on their shoulder. And you were very slow to speak to them because they're very far down. Remember, things go slower as you go down the tone scale. And you probably didn't even say very much, and just try to get her attention, which took a little bit of time. And she may have said, "Oh," and almost like you woke her up, which you did, because she was at a very low tone level. And I'm sure you've all experienced this with someone who was either sick or older. And you've done that innately. Realize that you were applying the tone scale. Now, sometimes you come up a person in grief, crying. And what are you going to do with that person? Well, what's just above grief is fear. So, and I'll show you the tone scale in a moment. So if you had someone in grief, you know, you could go up to them and you could say, "Oh, what happened?" "Oh, well, I lost my job. I don't know what I'm going to do, and I lost my job." And what you would do, you're not going to be enthusiastic and pat them on the back or say, "Oh, you know, it'll be better. I'll help you to find another job." It's too high for them. It's too high for them. So you've got to be closer to them, which is fear. And you would go, "Wow, that's so horrible. Gosh, I guess it's difficult to know what to do. You think it's possible? Maybe, I don't know. You think you could look for a job?" You see, you don't want to go too high. You stay there. You may say, "Well, that sounds too concocted, Dr. Fialkoff," but no, it isn't. You'll actually see this. If you have, let's say not this person, but you have your son or your daughter, and they're crying because they fell on the field playing soccer or football. When you run up to them, which you probably will, and you talk to them, don't automatically pop up and start telling, "Oh, you'll be okay," or "Come, what happened?" That's too high for them. It's too fast. Go up to them. Remember to listen. And you go, "What happened?" They may be crying. And remember, you're using fear. So, "Whoa, what? Where?" And you get them to talk. "Oh, I don't want to play anymore. I'm never going to play football again." And at that point, if you get them up into fear, "Why did I do this? I'm so afraid to do this anymore." You brought them up. Realize you brought them up from grief to fear. Now you can hit anger. Because now they're at fear. You go up a little higher again. You go, "You know, that happened to me once when I played football. I understand why you wouldn't want to play anymore. You know what? Maybe we'll just throw the football away." Even though you don't really mean it, you just want to get some agreement with him and say, "Yeah, maybe," your son may say, "Yeah, maybe we will. Maybe we'll throw the football away and I'll play baseball." All you're trying to do is raise them up the tone scale. Because remember, the lower tones are destructive and are not really true. But the upper tones are productive and are true. So as you raise them up the tone scale, don't worry about changing their mind. Let them say whatever they say and acknowledge them. But realize that they're going to change their minds on their own. So there's fear, as I told you, above fear. You have a tone level, it's very dangerous, covert hostility, where people pretend to be your friend. "Oh, I love your hairdo. I see you cut it. It looks good. You know, I loved it so much when it was long. Well, it looks good short too." You know, they give you backhanded compliments. This is a very dangerous tone level that you really want to know about to avoid. You know, "Oh, you bought that? Yeah, I was going to buy that too." Well, tell me another time when you bought. I got to run, but I'll speak to you later. congratulations on buying that. See, they leave you like all twisted. Covert hostility. Above that is anger, very easy to recognize. Above that is antagonism. Above that, boredom. Above that, conservatism, strong interest, and enthusiasm. So remember, you can watch the show some more, and you learn to go a half a tone to one tone above, listen well and acknowledge well, using the right tone level, implementing that triangle. There's a lot of information here. So I want to give you some things here, because as we're going through this, you see that as you go up the tone scale, things improve. So it's very interesting, because instead of drugs, instead of alcohol, if we have exercise, that's going up the tone scale. If we do more mind, body, spiritual exercises, that's going up the tone scale. If we do massage, if we use music, if we reduce our stress, what happens? All these things are making us more aware, faster. We're going up the tone scale, and you see how the CDC has recommended these non-drug approaches for pain. Very interesting. So I just bring that out because I'm trying to show you how the science and the communication are interacting. It's not a philosophy. And if we look at people who are very famous, very effective, productive people in our lives, look at what Michael Jordan innately said. Some people want it to happen. Some wish it would happen. Others make it happen. Now you have a tool. You have the tone scale from Hubbard. You know how to use the tones and going a half a tone to a tone above to help that person to be better. Remember, the whole purpose is to make that person have a better life. Not to use them. Not to put them under your control, but to free them. That was what Hubbard made the scale for. And then we have what Mahatma Gandhi said. Your beliefs become your thoughts. Your thoughts become your words. Your words become your actions. And this correlates totally what we've been talking about, how your thoughts go to your emotions, and your emotions flowing out create the actions in your life. So I hope that this has helped you. I hope that you see how this tone scale, which I'll leave here on the screen for you from Mr. Hubbard, can definitely help you in your life. So when you listen and when you really acknowledge, use the scale. You may want to watch this video again and again. If you want to take a course which is free, go on Scientology Volunteer Ministers.org and take the Emotional Tone Scale free course. It's for free. I hope you've enjoyed the show. When I first found this technology from a dental friend of mine, a Dr. Frank Duncan, I looked at it and I said, wow, it really works. Try it. Find out for yourself. You see that it truly works. Realize that what the Surgeon General has been talking about, the lack of social interaction causing physical and mental and emotional disease, societal problems, that we need to take a look at how to implement these workable technologies, the emotional tone scale and communication, so we get positive social interaction, so we can get healthy, so we can get better, so we can get happier, so we resolve the violence in our society, decrease the drug use, and maybe do something about these crazy wars that we have. Let's get our technology to work for us. Let's go up the tone scale, and it'll happen naturally. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I gave you a lot of information in a very short period of time. If you need to communicate anything, I'll be happy to speak to you. Just email Atimefortruthshow@gmail.com. Atimefortruthshow@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed the program. We'll see you on the next episode of A Time for Truth Show.
This show was sponsored by Attain for Truth Foundation Incorporated as a community service.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that giving everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet